She was just organizing books, until one fell open to her missing sister's diary entry. Dust filtered through the sunbeams that pierced the attic's grime-coated windows. Maya wiped sweat from her brow as she stacked another faded box of books. It was supposed to be a simple afternoon, organizing and clearing out her late grandmother's house before putting it on the market. But as she pulled out a particularly worn volume from the bottom shelf of a creaking bookcase, something shifted behind the wood. A soft thud echoed, followed by a fluttering sound as an object slid free and hit the floor. It was a diary. Leather-bound, frayed at the edges, and sealed shut with a brittle strap that crumbled in her hands. It fell open as if drawn to the light, its yellowing pages stiff but unmistakably inked with a familiar, looping script. Maya's heart thumped. The handwriting, it couldn't be. She stared at the first line. If someone finds this and it's Maya, I hope you're still looking. Her breath caught. Her hands trembled. She dropped the diary but then snatched it up again, eyes darting back to the date at the top of the page. June 14, 2006. Her sister, Leah, had disappeared that same summer, never to be seen again. She had been just 16. Maya, only 19, had clung to hope for years, but time had hardened the silence into assumed tragedy. But now, staring at the words that could only belong to Leah, full of urgency and fear, everything Maya believed about that summer cracked open. The diary entry was short, but packed with meaning. I couldn't tell anyone. They wouldn't understand. Grandma knew something. I'm scared. I think I'm being watched. I'll leave more pages hidden here. Maya's skin chilled despite the attic's heat. It was Leah's voice. Not a memory. Not imagined. Real and raw, scrawled across the pages in ink that had barely faded. For a split second, Maya felt like a teenager again, paralyzed by confusion and grief, caught in the endless cycle of what-ifs. Why hadn't this been found earlier? Had Grandma known all along? Maya looked around the dusty attic, suddenly alive with secrets she never knew were there. As the wind outside stirred the attic window just enough to creak it open, the diary pages rustled again, as if calling her forward. And deep in her chest, something long dormant awoke, an ember of purpose, and the terrifying possibility that Leah might not have vanished without a trace after all. Maya's days were quiet by design. She worked at the town's historic library, a Gothic building with creaky floors and shelves that smelled of oak and thyme. Her apartment was only a 10-minute walk away, a tiny second-story unit filled with potted plants, second-hand books, and the kind of stillness that came from years of trying not to feel too much. She lived alone and she liked it that way. At least, that's what she told people. On the surface, Maya was composed, capable. Her colleagues praised her attention to detail and the way she always knew which book someone needed, even if they didn't. But underneath that calm, she carried something heavier than she let on. A dull ache that had never dulled quite enough. The weight of her sister's disappearance still clung to her like dust in the attic air. Most people in town had stopped asking about Leah years ago. She had been 16, bright and wild-hearted, when she vanished one summer without a trace. No note. No evidence. No goodbyes. Just gone. The official reports were inconclusive. No body. No witnesses. The case went cold, and eventually, so did the conversations. But Maya had never stopped thinking about her. She just stopped talking about her. She remembered that summer in flashes, sunlight filtered through their bedroom window, Leah braiding her hair, both of them laughing over something stupid. And then suddenly nothing. Their parents, stunned into silence. Her mother's refusal to let police search Grandma's house. Her father, stiff with rage and helplessness. The news trucks. The whispers at school. Maya being sent away to live with an aunt in the next town over after she started screaming in her sleep. The silence became a barrier, between her and her family, between her and the world, even between her and herself. She never dated seriously, never let friends too close. She told herself she was too busy, too introverted. But the truth was harder. She was afraid. Afraid that opening herself up would mean having something else to lose. When her grandmother passed, Maya was the one who volunteered to sort the house. Her parents didn't argue. They hadn't been back in years. That house had always felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by questions no one wanted to answer. And now, the diary. Those few pages were all it took to shatter the fragile equilibrium she'd spent years constructing. Maya couldn't stop thinking about Leah's words. Grandma knew something. I'm being watched. The implications kept her awake at night, sitting upright in bed, her pulse racing. What had Leah been hiding? What had she discovered? And why hadn't Grandma said anything, ever? The attic no longer felt like just a storage space. It was a crypt, a time capsule, and possibly a crime scene all rolled into one. And in the center of it stood Maya, 32, tired, frightened, and angry all over again. At work, she found herself drifting. She'd reshelved books in the wrong sections, forget patrons' names. Her coworkers noticed, but no one pried. Maya had always been quiet, always a little withdrawn. This was just more of the same, wasn't it? Only it wasn't. Not anymore. That diary had unlocked something she'd buried so deep she forgot it was there, hope. Not the naive hope of a teenager watching out the window. This was different. It was darker, sharper. It had edges now. Questions that had never been answered. Secrets that refused to stay hidden. That night, Maya sat at her desk, the diary open in front of her, her fingers tracing Leah's looping signature at the bottom of the entry. She whispered her sister's name like a secret spell. Lee, what did you find? She didn't know what she would uncover. But for the first time in years, Maya wasn't just haunted by the past. She was ready to confront it. Maya couldn't stop reading. After work, after dinner, even in the quiet hours past midnight when the world slept and her building creaked with the hush of night, she'd be hunched over the pages like a scholar decoding ancient text. The more she read of Leah's diary, the more her hands trembled, not from fear, but from revelation. This wasn't just the rambling of a teenage girl. It was a breadcrumb trail through years of silence. Each page painted a different version of Leah than Maya remembered. Leah had always been vibrant, yes, but this diary revealed depths Maya hadn't known existed. There were mentions of friends Maya never met, names scrawled like secrets, J, Saf, River. Some entries were joyful, filled with descriptions of starlit nights and whispered conversations. Others were darker, fragmented, cautious, almost paranoid. Maya found herself reading those passages again and again. He knows I know something. Grandma warned me. She said not to ask questions. But how can I not? Jay says the hollow might still have the tape. I'm not safe. Not here, not anymore. Who is he? The more Maya searched, the less the word felt like a pronoun. It felt like a shadow. An unnamed, looming presence threaded through Leah's final weeks like a stain. He. That was all Leah had written. Never a name. Never a face. But always fear. The entries shifted in tone over time. Early pages were filled with hopes about college, arguments with their parents, secret crushes, little sketches in the margins. But by the final entries, Leah's handwriting had grown smaller, almost cramped. Every word seemed deliberate. Measured. And then came the repeated references to the hollow. Maya remembered the place only faintly, a wooded area behind their grandmother's property, just beyond the blackberry bushes. It had been their playground as kids. They'd called it the hollow because the trees there grew in a circle around an old, stone-lined fire pit. Leah used to pretend it was their kingdom. Maya had forgotten all about it. But Leah hadn't. She reread the last dated entry 3 times. If something happens to me, it's because I found the tape. Grandma said some truths ruin lives, but silence can kill. The hollow is the beginning. Tape. Silence. The diary wasn't just a confession. It was a warning. Maya's days were now driven by a different kind of urgency. She began rereading her grandmother's old notes and mail, checking every box in the attic, every drawer in the study. She tore apart photo albums, looking for familiar faces and inconsistencies. She mapped out Leah's timeline, where she had been, who she'd spoken to, and when the fear had started. Maya also started making lists, long, messy ones on yellow legal pads. Questions. Phrases that repeated in the diary. And always at the top, who is he? Obsessed wasn't a word Maya liked to use, but it fit. She even started avoiding phone calls from her parents. They didn't want the past reopened. They'd moved on, they'd said. Maya remembered the cold way her father would change the subject when she asked about Leah. Her mother's sudden migraines whenever her name came up. They wanted the silence. But Maya couldn't abide it anymore. Not after what she'd read. This wasn't a tragic accident. This wasn't some mysterious runaway story. There had been a truth to uncover. And someone, possibly more than one person, had worked very hard to keep it buried. Maya thought back to the diary line again. Grandma warned me not to ask questions. Why would their sweet, gentle grandmother say that? Maya asked to see the case file. Monroe hesitated but relented, pulling a dusty folder from the archives. Maya read through it on site. Interview transcripts, grainy photos, timelines. One detail stood out, a mention of an anonymous caller who had phoned in a tip the night Leah disappeared. The caller claimed to have seen her walking toward the woods. The call was traced to a payphone near the hollow. Maya's stomach turned. Back in town, she stopped by the local library's historical section to find any newspaper clippings that hadn't made it online. She discovered a buried article, not about Leah, but about another girl. 10 years before Leah vanished, another teen went missing. Her body was never found. The only connection? That girl had been staying at her grandmother's home for the summer. Maya's mind reeled. When she confronted her parents about Richard and the other girl, her mother's face turned cold. "Stop this," she said. "You're going to destroy everything." "Leah was your daughter," Maya said. Her father snapped. "And digging through ghosts won't bring her back." But Maya could see it in their eyes. Fear. Shame. Maybe even guilt. Still, she pressed on. Every place she went, every question she asked, brought her closer to something she couldn't yet name, something everyone else wanted forgotten. Even her aunt, when Maya visited her unexpectedly, wouldn't speak of the past. "Leah knew too much," was all she said before slamming the door. Maya stood alone now, against her family, her community, and the ghosts clawing their way back through Leah's words. But she wasn't turning back. Love, guilt, and unspoken grief had kept her sister hidden in shadows for too long. Leah had left her a map, a voice across the years, begging to be heard. And Maya would listen, no matter the cost. The living room was quiet except for the low hum of the old ceiling fan. Maya stood by the fireplace, holding the diary tightly in one hand, its corners worn down by her rereading. Her parents sat across from her, their expressions guarded, wary. Her mother's fingers were clenched around a teacup, unmoving. Her father, eyes narrowed, leaned forward like he was bracing for an attack. Maya hadn't meant to start a war, but she couldn't stay silent anymore. "I know about Richard," she began, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "And I know Leah was afraid of him." Her mother's grip on the teacup tightened until it shook slightly. Her father's face flushed red, but he didn't interrupt. "I found her diary," Maya continued. "It wasn't just a random disappearance. She was planning something. She knew something." "You're dredging up pain for no reason," her mother snapped suddenly. "She's gone, Maya. Let her go." "No," Maya stepped forward. "You let her go. You shut down the investigation. You buried her story. But I won't. She was my sister." Her father exhaled slowly, voice like sandpaper. "You don't know everything. There were things going on that you were too young to understand." "Then explain it to me," Maya pleaded. "Tell me why no one looked for her. Why did you let Richard disappear?" Her mother stood abruptly. "Because we were afraid," she shouted, her voice cracking. "Afraid of what it would mean. Afraid of what people would say. Your grandmother insisted we keep it quiet." Maya blinked. "Grandma?" Her father nodded slowly. "She knew. Or at least suspected. Leah told her things. About him. But your grandmother said it was just a girl acting out. That Leah was dramatic. Making things up." "She wasn't making it up," Maya said. "She left clues. She left this." She held up the diary, trembling. Just then, the door creaked open and in walked Aunt Denise, who'd heard about the confrontation and decided to come over. Her arrival brought with it a wave of fresh tension. She glanced at everyone inside. She told me too, Denise said quietly. One night, Leah came to my place crying. Said she felt watched. Said he touched her once, but she didn't want to tell anyone. She was scared. I told your mother. Maya turned to her parents, shocked. You knew. You all knew. Her father's face crumpled with guilt. We didn't know what to believe. You chose not to believe her, Maya said, tears brimming. You let her vanish without demanding answers. Because we thought we were protecting you, her mother cried. It tore us apart, Maya. Your father and I nearly divorced. We stopped talking to Denise for years. Aunt Denise nodded. Your grandmother didn't want police crawling around the property. She said it would shame the family. Shame? Maya scoffed. This isn't about shame. This is about a missing child. She needed you. Silence fell like a weight. Finally, her cousin Daniel, who had been sitting in the corner quietly since she arrived, cleared his throat. You know, he said, I saw Leah that night. Everyone turned to him in stunned silence. I was 13. I couldn't sleep. I saw her walking into the woods. She looked like she was crying. But I didn't say anything. I thought she just needed to be alone. Why didn't you tell anyone? Maya asked, voice shaking. I was scared. And when she didn't come back, it felt too late. Then it all spiraled. The cops came. Grandma said not to say anything. I buried it. Maya couldn't breathe. Every piece of this mystery had been sitting under the weight of her family's silence and shame. All these years, they had chosen secrecy over truth, silence over justice. Do you realize, she said, voice cracking, what you let happen to her? She trusted you. She wrote that she thought someone would believe her, that someone would help. And you turned away. Her mother began to sob quietly. Her father looked down, unable to meet her eyes. I want to fix this, Maya said finally. But I don't know if I can forgive you. Her mother stepped toward her, reaching out, then hesitating. We thought we were protecting what was left. But maybe we just kept killing her memory, piece by piece. I don't want her to be a ghost anymore, Maya said. I want the truth, even if it hurts. Aunt Denise nodded. Then we start here, with the truth. No more secrets. The family sat together that evening, for the first time in years, not in peace but in shared pain. The old wounds were bleeding again, but at least they were open. And maybe, just maybe, healing could finally begin. The morning air was damp with dew as Maya stood at the edge of the woods. Her boots sank slightly into the mossy ground, the earth soft from the previous night's rain. Trees towered around her like silent sentinels. Ahead lay the hollow, a name whispered in her sister's diary and etched in her memory like a half-forgotten dream. She hadn't been here in years, not since the summer before Leah disappeared. Back then, it was their secret escape, a sunken patch of forest beyond their grandmother's land, where they'd build forts out of branches and imagine kingdoms ruled by warrior queens. But now, the hollow had taken on darker meaning. Maya clutched the diary in one hand and a flashlight in the other, even though daylight filtered weakly through the thick canopy. She moved forward, pushing past overgrown brush, ducking under drooping limbs. Her heart pounded with each step, the forest both nostalgic and menacing. Then she saw it. A clearing, sunken slightly from the rest of the forest floor. The hollow. An old treehouse stood crumbling in one corner, more skeletal than sturdy now. To the right, half buried under ivy, a small wooden box peeked out of the dirt, just like Leah had described. Maya dropped to her knees, heart racing, and brushed the vines aside. The box was weather-worn, but intact. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside were trinkets, a plastic bracelet, a broken watch, a tiny notebook, and a photograph of Leah and another girl Maya didn't recognize. Tucked beneath it all was a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully. Leah's handwriting. He said he'd find me here. He always knows. But I have to keep coming back. It's the only place I feel real. I think he followed me last time. If anything happens, check under the floorboards. Maya's breath caught. She looked toward the treehouse. The floorboards. It took her an hour to get inside, every step creaking with the risk of collapse. She crawled across the floor, careful and deliberate, until she found the spot, a loose board near the back wall. She pried it up. Underneath, wrapped in plastic, was a bundle of papers and a cloth pouch. She opened the pouch first. Inside was a necklace. Leah's. Maya remembered it from their childhood, a gift from their mother, silver with a tiny bird charm. She hadn't seen it since the day Leah vanished. The papers were more disturbing. Letters. Notes. All from the man only referred to as he in the diary. Maya's stomach turned. The handwriting was coarse and aggressive, the tone obsessive. The man had followed Leah. He had known her routines. He had written things like, "You belong to me. No one else will understand you like I do. If you tell anyone, they'll think you're crazy." There was one more note, undated, scrawled in Leah's frantic handwriting. "I don't feel safe. He cornered me by the school. He said I'd disappear and no one would care. I don't know what to do anymore. I want to run, but I'm scared." Maya's hands trembled. Suddenly, the world around her seemed to spin. She leaned against the wall of the treehouse and shut her eyes. Flashbacks crashed into her like waves. Leah coming home late with a ripped sleeve. Leah crying in their room, saying she couldn't sleep. Their parents brushing it off. She's just being dramatic. Maya had forgotten those moments. Or maybe she'd buried them. The truth hit her like a freight train. Her sister had tried to escape something, someone, and no one believed her. Not their parents. Not the police. Not even Maya. She left the treehouse, stumbling slightly, and sat in the clearing, trying to steady her breathing. She reached for her phone. She had to call someone. The police? Her aunt? She wasn't sure. But she knew she had something real now. Something undeniable. As she looked around the clearing, she noticed something else. Carvings on a tree trunk nearby. Faint but still there. L+M, sisters always. Underneath, another line. "If you find this, I love you." Maya choked back a sob. Her hands went to the necklace, now looped around her fingers. She couldn't tell if her tears were from grief or guilt or a strange sort of relief. Maybe all three. She had found what she came for. The hollow had given her what her family never could, the truth. Later that evening, back at her apartment, Maya laid out the evidence. The notes, the photo, the necklace. She recorded everything in a notebook of her own, determined not to let it fade into silence like it had the first time. She even looked up the girl from the photo. After a few hours of research, she found a match, Julia Reyes, a girl who had transferred schools the year Leah vanished. A name never brought up in the investigation. Maya jotted it down. She was going to find her. Because this wasn't just about closure anymore. It was about justice. For Leah. For all the girls like her who disappeared into the void of silence. As Maya stared at her sister's diary once more, one thought echoed louder than all others. She didn't just vanish. She was erased. And now, I'm writing her back into the world. It was just after dawn when Maya sat across from Detective Alicia Porter, a woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for chasing cold cases no one else would touch. Maya laid the bundle of diary pages, notes, and the photograph carefully on the table between them in the small-town precinct. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she recounted the story, the attic discovery, the secret in the hollow, the name on the back of the photograph. Everything Leah had hidden away. Detective Porter studied the pages for a long time without speaking. When she finally looked up, her expression had changed. "This isn't just circumstantial," she said. "This could reopen the case. But you need to be prepared. The truth rarely comes clean." Maya nodded. She was more than prepared. She was ready. What followed was a whirlwind: interviews, forensic analysis, a quiet but determined investigation spearheaded by Porter and her team. The handwriting samples in the threatening letters were matched to a man Maya had never met but instantly recognized from an old family photo. Gerald Whitman, her father's former business partner and her uncle by marriage. Gerald had always been part of the family's outer orbit. He'd show up at holidays, sometimes bring gifts, and disappear without a trace. Maya hadn't thought of him in years. But Leah had. Leah had written about him, with dread, about his obsession, about the way he lingered after gatherings. And now the pieces clicked. Gerald had groomed Leah. manipulated her, threatened her. And when she tried to escape, she vanished. Maya's stomach turned when she realized the extent of the cover-up. Her father had known something. Not everything, but enough. The discomfort, the tension, the silence that had hung over their house after Leah's disappearance, it all made sense now. It wasn't just grief. It was guilt. The confrontation came a week later. Gerald hadn't been arrested yet, but he'd been questioned and was clearly rattled. Maya attended a family gathering, one her parents hesitantly arranged after she demanded answers. The air was thick with tension as Gerald arrived, flanked by his wife, Maya's Aunt Renee, who looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I know what you did to Leah," Maya said coldly, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room fell silent. Gerald froze. His expression didn't register guilt, not at first. Just calculation. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he muttered. "I have your letters, your threats, your handwriting, her words." "The police do too," she replied, her voice steel. Her father paled. Her mother covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Renee broke down crying. "You covered for him," Maya said to her parents, voice shaking now. "You didn't protect her. You let her suffer. You let her vanish, and you said nothing." Her mother finally spoke. "We were afraid, Maya. Afraid of what it would do to the family. Afraid of what we'd find. I didn't know the full truth, I swear it. But I suspected and I buried it." Maya's father couldn't meet her eyes. The confrontation didn't end with an apology or catharsis. It ended with police at the door the next morning, Gerald taken away in cuffs. The DNA from an old scarf found in the hollow tied him to the scene. Renee gave a statement. The town's whispers turned into roars as the news broke. Leah's disappearance was finally ruled a homicide. Her remains, buried in a shallow grave miles from town, were found after Gerald broke during interrogation. Maya attended the memorial with a strange numbness in her chest. A makeshift shrine was erected in the town library. Photos of Leah, her artwork, the infamous diary. Framed in glass. People came from across the state. Friends Maya hadn't seen in years. Strangers who remembered Leah as a bright, spirited girl with a future stolen too soon. Justice had come. But it didn't erase the pain. Still, there was something healing about the truth finally surfacing. The silence that had haunted their family was shattered. And in its place, there was room to breathe. Maya's relationship with her parents remained fragile but evolving. Her mother, especially, began therapy and even attended a survivors group. Her father remained distant, but Maya sensed a deep, gnawing remorse in him, a regret that, while it couldn't undo the past, might eventually crack his stony reserve. In the weeks that followed, Maya became an unlikely voice in the community. She spoke at local schools, warning about the dangers of silence, the importance of listening to victims. She helped organize a foundation in Leah's name, dedicated to supporting young women facing abuse or threats. But the most powerful healing came in the quiet moments, sitting alone in her apartment, diary in hand, flipping through the words of a girl who had once seemed lost forever. Leah's voice had guided her through the darkness. And now it would guide others. One afternoon, Maya placed the necklace, Leah's bird charm, into a shadow box beside the diary. She hung it above her writing desk, where morning light caught the silver charm and made it glow. Relief. Sorrow. They lived side by side now, like sisters. And Maya finally understood that facing the past hadn't broken her, it had made her whole. The first time Maya spoke publicly about Leah was at the town library, the same one she had worked at for years in silence, shelving books, assisting students, and hiding from her own history. Now, she stood at the front of a small room filled with chairs, community members, and a few familiar faces who remembered her as the quiet librarian. They didn't know the whole story, but they would soon. She held the diary in her hands, its weathered pages tied with a thin purple ribbon. It no longer frightened her. It no longer represented just pain. It was now a bridge between past and future, between trauma and transformation. "I used to think my sister disappeared," Maya began, her voice calm but full of emotion, "and that was the end of her story. But I've come to understand that her story didn't end when she went missing. It was hidden. and bringing it to light has changed everything. In the weeks since Gerald's arrest and Leah's remains were found, the community had rallied behind Maya. News outlets covered the story. Advocacy groups reached out. Survivors contacted her with stories of their own. The outpouring was overwhelming but also empowering. Maya had never seen herself as someone who could lead, but now, she couldn't ignore the pull of purpose. She launched the Leah Project, a non-profit initiative dedicated to supporting the families of missing persons, advocating for justice in cold cases, and offering mental health resources to those left behind in silence. With initial funding from a local arts grant and support from Leah's Memorial Fund, Maya transformed a vacant community space into the organization's headquarters. The building bore a mural on its front wall, an abstract painting of a bird in flight, inspired by Leah's favorite charm necklace. Inside, families could access legal resources, counseling, and a quiet room dedicated to memory, a place where names, photos, and short bios of missing individuals lined the walls. It was solemn and sacred. It gave the forgotten a voice. Maya's mother, once broken by shame and secrecy, began volunteering weekly. She organized care packages and helped with events, slowly mending the relationship she had long neglected. Their healing wasn't quick or easy, but it was real. They cried together sometimes, held hands during meetings, and even laughed when sharing memories of Leah, the way she used to dance in the living room or sneak extra cookies from the kitchen jar. Maya's father remained more reserved, but he, too, showed signs of change. He visited the center one day, quietly leaving behind a framed photo of Leah and a note, "I was too late before. Let this help me be on time now." Maya placed that photo beside the diary in a display case that stood near the entrance. The diary had become more than evidence. It was a symbol, not of loss, but of survival, of truth that insisted on being heard. She still opened it sometimes, reading Leah's words not with tears, but with gratitude. Her sister's voice had brought her back to herself. Life was far from perfect. The scars were deep, and there were still nights when the silence crept in, reminding Maya of everything she'd endured. But now, there was a counterbalance, laughter echoing through the community center's hallways, young volunteers folding flyers, families hugging after long conversations, and the quiet knowledge that Leah's life had sparked something bigger. Maya often ended her talks with the same line: "We don't move on. We move forward, with love, with memory, and with the power of truth." And each day, with every family she helped, every story she heard, Maya felt herself step more fully into peace, not because the pain had vanished, but because it had found a purpose. Leah wasn't just remembered. She was honored. And through her, Maya had found the strength to live not in the shadow of the past, but in the light of everything still possible.